Dinner that night tasted like nothing. My father-in-law doesn't shout. He projects. There's a difference. His voice carries the confidence of someone who has never been interrupted in his own house. We were halfway through the meal when he leaned back in his chair and said it, almost cheerfully. "Don't forget who funded your start." He didn't look at me when he said it. He looked at my son, a 10-year-old doesn't fully understand equity structures or seed capital. Understands tone. He understands when one adult lowers another. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself, remind anyone that the funding had been structured as an investment, not a donation. I just chewed, swallowed, wiped my son's mouth with a napkin, and asked if anyone wanted more rice. My husband stared at his plate. Peace, to him, has always meant silence. That night, after my son was asleep, I opened my laptop. The numbers were not emotional. Care about pride. They told a simple story. The initial capital had converted 2 years ago. The company had outperformed projections. My reinvested profits had grown steadily, quietly, without commentary. The clause had always been there, buyout rights triggered after specific revenue milestones. Milestones we had crossed 6 months ago. No one mentioned it. They assumed I wouldn't act. Over the next 3 days, made phone calls during school drop-offs and between supplier meetings. I spoke with our accountant, then a corporate lawyer. Calm conversations. No urgency in my voice. I wasn't angry. Anger would have meant he still controlled the temperature of my decisions. Wednesday afternoon, the paperwork was drafted. The valuation was fair, generous, even. Principal returned. Interest included. Exit. I scheduled a board meeting for Friday. My father-in-law arrived confident as usual. Sat at the head of the table in the glass conference room, the same way he had since the early days when his money was the oxygen that kept us breathing. My husband sat beside him, assuming this was routine. The lawyer sat across from them. I presented the documents without flourish. The company has exercised its buyout clause. I said, your investment is being repaid in full with accrued interest. Upon signature, all shares revert. My father-in-law frowned, not because he didn't understand, but because he did. He flipped through the pages once, then again. This wasn't necessary, he said finally. It was, I replied, not sharp, not emotional, just factual. He glanced at my husband, expecting intervention. My husband looked at me differently than he had at dinner, less certain of his assumptions. You're making a statement, my father-in-law said. No, I answered. I'm closing an account. The lawyer cleared his throat and pointed to the signature lines. Authority has a sound. It's the soft slide of paper across polished wood. It's the click of a pen being pressed down. It's the moment a third party, neutral and licensed, confirms that something is legally complete. He signed. So did I. By the time we stood up, the company was entirely mine. There was no applause, no raised voices, no dramatic walkout. Just a transfer receipt already scheduled to clear by end of day. That evening, we had dinner again. Not at his house, at ours. No one mentioned funding. No one mentioned the meeting. My son talked about a science project. Husband passed the bread without being asked. My father-in-law spoke about traffic. The atmosphere had shifted, but not theatrically. It was subtle. A recalibration. Later, after the dishes were done, my husband stood in the kitchen doorway. You didn't tell me you were planning that, he said. You didn't ask, I replied. It wasn't cruelty. It was observation. He leaned against the frame, processing. You could have just corrected him at dinner. Yes, I said. That would have made it an argument. This made it a fact. He nodded slowly. For the first time in years, he looked unsure of his footing, not threatened, just aware that the ground was no longer tilted in his father's favor. There is a difference between revenge and removal. I didn't humiliate him. I didn't expose him, raise my voice in front of my child. I simply removed the leverage. Something in the house feels quieter now. Not warmer, colder, just balanced. My father-in-law still visits. He still offers advice. But there's a pause before he speaks. He's remembering that ownership is no longer implied. My son will probably never remember the sentence spoken over dinner. He will grow up in a home where his mother signs her own documents. And that feels sufficient. No celebration followed. No victory dinner. Just work on Monday, invoices to review, employees to pay. Independence, I've learned, is rarely loud, is administrative.